Member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. If people think that the fires we're seeing are business as usual, they're clearly not looking at a map of New South Wales. It's been a month since the Gospers Mountain bushfire began. That's in my electorate of Macquarie and many other electorates around me. It is a huge fire, and hundreds of volunteer rural firefighters, members of the SES, as well as New South Wales Parks and Wildlife and New South Wales Fire and Rescue staff have been on the go day and night simply to try and control it. We've also had great support from the CFA, and I've never been so happy to see a Victorian as I was when their trucks rolled up a week or so ago. Realistically, people are not trying to extinguish this fire. It's too big for that. They're just trying to move it around and through so that it causes as little damage as possible. And we simply wait for huge amounts of rain. As of this morning, the area burnt is 188,507 hectares, with a perimeter of 570 kilometres. The sporadic rainfall and new fires started by lightning hasn't helped the efforts to bring it under control, and this fire is likely to flare up and expand until we have those decent rains. We have had an emergency in the Hawkesbury. We've lost 2 homes. We've lost property, fences, farmland. There's been loss to business. There's been dislocation of families. An emergency is not defined by mass house losses or by death. It doesn't need to be a tragedy to be an emergency. There are people impacted. I spoke to Colo Heights residents who were away from their home for nearly 2 weeks. Some were staying with friends, some were with relatives, some were in caravan parks. One woman had no information because there was no central place to go to find out what the current situation was, so she called me to see if it was okay to go home. Another Colo Heights woman has carried heavy losses. There's the repair costs of fencing, and this is really typical of what people are now going home to. Repair cost of fencing, refilling of water tanks because there's no town water, a huge clean-up, trees that have been felled but not mulched as the fire moved closer. There's been power lost, obviously, so freezers and fridges need to be cleared out. There's stock to be relocated, taken back to the properties. There's a lot of cost involved, and people have taken time off work to fight the fires not only around their own properties but around their neighbours. And of course our RFS volunteers, many have taken time off work, but for the people affected directly by the fires on their properties, they're now facing pretty heavy costs. I asked questions this week about why the Hawkesbury isn't included in the new announcement by the New South Wales and federal government, and I really support the announcement for additional funding that's for the north of the state. That's as it should be. You know, a horrific time has been had there, and they will need immediate and long-running help. But our businesses, our farmers, places like Settlers Arms Pub in St Albans, now they're not eligible for those $15,000 grants, but they are businesses that have lost business. People have lost income. Now, I really congratulate...
The House proceedings are suspended to enable the honourable members to attend the division. Okay, I'll call the member for Macquarie in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. During these fires, I have been amazed at the determination of the Rural Fire Service leadership in the Hawkesbury under Karen Hodges, who has brought together the various districts affected by fire, from the Blue Mountains to the Hunter in the north, Lithgow in the west. And also the willingness of so many volunteers from within the Hawkesbury and across Sydney to show up, you know, for very long shifts after shifts. This has been going on for a month, and there's been weeks of intense 24-hour-a-day firefighting. At the morning handovers, when I see the night shift handover to the day shift, I can see the tiredness starting to grow, and you'd be not a human being if you weren't exhausted by the sort of efforts that they're making. You know, I'd just like to say to the volunteers who can travel hours either side of their shift, thank you for what you're doing. When I arrive, as I did last Friday and came across a crew from Davidson, I recognised a former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, and as I have with all the firefighters, thanked him for coming out and being part of the effort that's being made in the Hawkesbury. And of course, those volunteers, not only do they do 12 or 17-hour shifts, but they then front up for their paid work the next day. Except those who have employers who are good enough to give them time off work.
Excuse me, a division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. Proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
The debate will resume, and I call the member for Macquarie in continuation.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. So the volunteers who have been out on site trying to control these fires for the last month have done an incredible job, supported of course by SES, Police, Parks and Wildlife, who have just been full on involved in the process. There's also been a very grateful community who has wanted to do whatever it can to help the firefighters. And while meals are provided by the Hawkesbury headquarters, the community has been keen to donate all the snacks that get the firefighters from their brigade to the fire site. And we've been really pleased to help collect and distribute those supplies, everything from chips and electrolytes through to lip balm and all the things that make the job just a little bit easier. And so I spent Saturday distributing some of those supplies, able to talk to people from right up the top at Bilpin. I've also been in to see the Yarramundi mob and the Winmalee firefighters, because Mountains firefighters have been putting in hours and hours of effort to help contain this blaze, because we know that it's not that far from the Blue Mountains. It's a huge fire and it's going to keep growing. So thank you to everyone who's donated. People like the staff of Wise Employment, Currajong Kitchens, who were very generous with their lavash, and individuals like Anthony and Sophie, and people like Alison and Kirsty, who helped get supplies not just to rural fire brigades but also up to residents of Colo Heights who weren't able to get easy access in and out of their properties. They didn't want to leave the area while the fires were really active. I'm pleased to see that police have today been able to open Putty Road up to Colo Heights. That makes a huge difference and will help with the recovery process. One of the things that hasn't been working so well is telecommunications, and I really want to flag with the government and with Telstra and Optus that there is a lot of work to be done to give people peace of mind. People like the residents of Mountain Lagoon who have no landlines. There's no mobile signal there and they have no landlines. And while a bushfire is in the area and heading their way, that is a huge concern. I'll continue to be a very noisy voice in making sure that those communications are restored and maintained. Another place where that's an issue is St Albans. It would be great to see the black spot mobile towers that have been promised there actually delivered. There is extra anxiety when fires are around, and people deserve the ability to be able to communicate. The NBN truck that we saw outside Parliament today, a mobile truck to deliver communications, could provide great benefit, but we actually need to see things like that in the field, as well as Telstra and Optus putting mobile equipment in, temporary portable equipment in, so that people can have communication. Deputy Speaker, there has been an extraordinary effort by firefighters, police, emergency services and all the people I've named and the community. I guess I've been a bit underwhelmed by the response at a local level from the state and government and the local council who have made efforts, but I've got to say I think we can learn from what we've seen so far with this fire, that there's a whole lot more we can do. You know, we can do things like elected representatives can be at RFS community sessions to hear what people are feeling, to hear what they're experiencing. We can open contact points so people have a single place to go to get information. about it. If people are told to head to Wilberforce, there could be safe places that they know they can go. Those safer neighbourhood places really don't exist in the Hawkesbury. So I think there's a lot that we can do, and I think we have to better recognise when we are in an emergency. And we have had an emergency. Businesses have suffered, lives have been impacted, community members have been through terrible things, 2 homes have been lost, a lot of property destroyed. And anyone who doesn't think it's been an emergency is out of touch, and it's not summer yet.